A Russian unit just snapped. Near Chasiv Yar, soldiers gunned down their own platoon commander, then surrendered en masse to Ukraine. This wasn't an isolated breakdown. It's the latest and clearest sign that the Russian military is cracking under pressure. Discipline is unraveling, morale is collapsing, and Russia's war machine is turning on itself. Let's break down what triggered this stunning mutiny, what it reveals about the state of Russia's forces, and how Ukraine could turn these fractures into major battlefield gains. First, the actual details of the event. According to Ukrainian Defense Ministry intelligence, the incident occurred when Russian troops refused orders to storm fortified Ukrainian positions.
Do you know why they refused orders? I'll let you guys take a wild guess.
Without adequate artillery or armored support. They were basically ordered to take part in a suicide mission when their commander threatened to
There it is. There it is.
execute soldiers who wouldn't advance. They turned their weapons on him instead.
Wow.
The details didn't come from Ukrainian troops though. This vital insight into the Russian military and the current state of its morale comes straight from the Russian troops themselves, who were there for the entire event. You see, once the troops killed their platoon commander, they didn't really have anywhere to go but Ukraine itself. Under Russian law, they would be detained and likely imprisoned by Russia's military police, which have reportedly caught wind of the mutiny and already begun searching for the deserters. Therefore,
crazy.
the soldiers immediately waved white flags of surrender while passing through the contested front line, where they were captured by Ukrainian troops who passed on this valuable information. The report from Ukrainian intelligence didn't state the exact names of the mutineers and the location of the incident, but the general location is believed to be Chasiv Yar, near the city of Bakhmut, which has been a hotly contested region even before Bakhmut fell to the attritional warfare conducted by Russian forces. The loss of a single platoon is unlikely to turn the tide for the Ukrainian units and allow them to retake the city of Bakhmut. Ukraine has listed the city as one of the major tactical targets throughout the war, despite a lack of actual strategic value it has in the grand scale of the war itself. But this mutiny and subsequent surrender are an excellent insight into Russia's ongoing failures to capture Ukraine and also drive its own military forward. Russia isn't just losing battles and people, it's losing the will to actually win the war in the first place, which...
Well, of course, they're fighting for what? What are the Russian men are fighting for in Ukraine? I can only think of one thing. I can only think of two things. They're either super brainwashed and stupid, or there's no jobs back at home and this is the highest paying job they can get, but also stupid because very high risk of dying, right?
can spell doom for the entire war effort. And this is interlaced with the country's gradual economic, demographic, and geopolitical decline over the course of the 3 years of the war. While Russian state media focuses on capturing villages Ukraine had already liberated months earlier, the real war is happening far behind the lines in the databases and supply lines that are responsible for delivering soldiers to the front in the first place. The recent mutiny is just one of the symptoms of a disease that has been plaguing Russia since practically the second year of the war: widespread manpower shortage. The numbers here paint a grim picture. When the war started, the Russian military was estimated to have around 900,000 active troops, with around 100,000 to 160,000 of them stationed around Ukraine and poised to attack. When the invasion happened and the initial attacks were rebuffed by Ukraine, Russia deployed another 190,000 soldiers to fight in the war, as well as raised its contracting options and benefits to lure in more people. 3 years later, those numbers have changed drastically. For one, the active military size is estimated to be around 1.1 million, with around 660,000 deployed in Ukraine. But instead of steadily growing in skill and experience, the Russian army has been replacing the soldiers it loses with ones that are not nearly as experienced or trained. According to estimates made by Ukraine's Ministry of Defense, Russia hit the 1 million casualty mark somewhere around June 2025.
This is a mind disease.
Counting both dead and wounded soldiers who can't return to combat in a reasonable time. Of course, these are figures straight from a country that has every incentive to inflate the numbers for publicity and morale, so it's worth taking with a grain of salt. However, even more conservative US intelligence estimates put Russian casualties around 750,000 by March 2025. If we go by simple linear expansion, Russia will indeed eventually hit 1 million casualties by the end of the 4th year, according to US estimates alone. This is not just a setback, it's a practical disintegration of Russia's military integrity.
It's not just a disintegration of military in Russia, it's also Russia's having a population decline before they started this war with Ukraine. Do you understand? Do you understand what I'm saying? this is not just a collapse of a military decline in the casualties. This is also a decline as a whole. Russian society is literally collapsing. Like, this just increased the chances of it collapsing even quicker.
Casualties here are higher than in every conflict Russia has been a part of since World War II.
Wow.
The staggering casualty rate directly leads to a pattern where Russia is forced to use more drastic measures to conscript or sign up soldiers to fight. With practically its entire pre-war troop reserves gone, most of the soldiers who are currently on the front can assume to be relatively fresh recruits. But here's where the maths becomes truly devastating. Russian forces have advanced an average of only 50 meters per day in areas like Kharkiv. When you scale that against
50 meters per day. What is that, like 65 yards a day?
Ukraine's entire territory, the advance is practically negligible. And the cost of that advance is more than just in men or equipment. It's straight up bankrupting the country.
Right.
Russia is spending World War II level resources, with an estimated 40% of its federal budget on defense, on a war that has made it an outcast from most international agreements. The incident near Chasiv Yar involving the 20th Combined Arms Army also reflects a broader pattern of Russia losing the higher echelons of the army during the war before it can promote more. Russian sources have confirmed deaths of 12 generals, with Ukraine citing an additional 4. At the same time, Mediazona, an independent Russian news outlet, claims to have found that at least 5,138 Russian officers had been killed as of June 2025. This might not sound like much when compared to the gross casualty numbers, but it can put the entire war in jeopardy when you consider Russian military tactics. You see, unlike the West, Russian military doctrine is highly centralized. The generals and higher officers hold the most power and provide orders down the chain of command, where they are expected to be obeyed with practically no modifications and no regard to the actual state of the front line. This creates major issues for the Russian military that Ukraine has thoroughly abused throughout the war. First, it makes the military far less adaptive to changing situations than it should. Considering the extent of surveillance and drone warfare, Ukraine can get practically real-time information on Russian army movements and extrapolate the intended targets in short term. Then it can use the advanced drone squads to provide enough pressure or overturn a key aspect of the operation so it becomes less viable for the Russian command. This has, at times, resulted in devastating Russian losses, where a vast majority of the troops died due to having no exit routes or plans for what to do if the situation took a sudden turn. Secondly, killing an officer creates a large gap in the chain of command that the Russian military doesn't have a ready way to close at the speeds necessary to make up for the potential tactical losses. This meant that Ukraine can directly target officers with precision strikes. Casualties Russia can't afford. He can't negotiate from a position of strength when his own troops are turning their weapons on their officers. And he can't sustain the economic burden of a war that's consuming 40% of his federal budget for territorial gains measured in football fields. More fundamentally, Russia's class-based conscription strategy reveals Putin's inability to make the argument to his people that the war against Ukraine is existential rather than optional. By systematically shielding Moscow's elite and middle class from conscription while targeting the rural poor and ethnic minorities, Putin has essentially admitted that this war isn't worth the sacrifice of Russia's economically and politically important populations. The unequal conscription creates a positive feedback loop with negative results. Russia's poorest regions lose their working-age men to death or emigration. Further,
Russia's poorest regions are all besides 2 cities. That's St. Petersburg and Moscow. Everywhere else is pretty poor.
Impoverishing these areas and reducing their economic productivity. The families left behind sometimes even have to subsidize the war effort by buying military equipment for their conscripted relatives. Meanwhile, Russia's economically productive regions remain largely insulated from the war's costs, creating no political pressure for the conflict to end, but also no genuine economic mobilization for victory. And now, precious resources that could support domestic forces are instead spent on foreign mercenaries who can't even communicate with their supposed allies. If the war truly threatens Russia as a whole, Moscow wouldn't recruit soldiers who can't speak Russian and don't understand basic military protocols. It would call up a general draft and rely on having a population close to 4 times that of Ukraine to win, with every demographic mobilized equally. The fact that Russia is paying North Korea for troops while simultaneously providing expensive military technology transfers suggests that Russia is hoping that the rest of the country can pay for this loss out of pocket before the entire economic system implodes. And the more time passes, the more likely the latter scenario becomes. According to a Forbes analysis, Russia would need approximately 230 years to fully occupy Ukraine at the current rate of advance. This would require around 100 million Russian casualties.
230 years and 100 million casualties. It's not happening.
which is more than the number of adults it has at the moment. Unfortunately for Russia, it doesn't have 230 years. It doesn't have the demographic base for 100 million casualties. And as incidents like the commander's killing near Chasiv Yar demonstrate, it's rapidly losing the one thing no military can function without: the willingness of soldiers to obey orders from a system that views them as expendable. Thank you for watching.
The reason I make these videos is I'm trying to show the world how stupid this war is and who started this war, Russia. And I'm gonna keep reacting to these videos. I want you to know what the hell is going on in there. So please share these videos, comment on these videos, like these videos. This video that I watched will also be in my video description. Please watch the military show, subscribe to them, check them out, share it with your friends. And as always, підпишися безкоштовно. Subscribe, it's free. And we'll see you guys next time. До побачення.